Hello, all. Welcome to Reframe, Mental Health Summit. My name is Ragini, and I am a senior editor at SheThePeople TV. Today, social media is an integral part of our lives. We have everything accessible at the tip of our fingers. And while there are several benefits of staying connected, there can also be a bit of negative impact on mental well being. So, how is the young population navigating their mental health journey in the age of social media? And to talk about this, we have two esteemed guests on the panel. Swarnima Bhattacharya is the co founder of Gayatri, a complete ecosystem for women's healthcare. She also writes widely on gender and health and has published on various notable platforms. Shweta Srinivasan is a practicing psychologist from Mumbai. She's the co founder of the mindclan.com, a platform that curates and lists inclusive mental health resources across India. Thank you, both of you, for being here. And I want to begin by mentioning that while the youth today is quite digitally savvy and self aware in their own way, there's an added pressure to succeed and excel at whatever cost it may be. But there is a cost. There is the mental health concern, the mounting mental health concerns. You two are at the forefront of services dedicated to helping the young people. How do you individually recognize this need? And let us begin by understanding, is there a right time to seek help? Swarnima, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hello everyone. And like Ragini said, we are Gayatri. We're a women's health platform, and of course, at the underlying thing is always mental health. There's no health without mental health, and of course, there are a lot of young people coming to us. No, I'll just answer this question in two, three parts. When you say, is there a right time to get help? You can get help whenever you think the time is right. If you feel that things are out of sorts, if you think that you're not feeling your complete optimal self, you feel that you need some support and you're not able to find that objective support system, then that is the time you need to seek help, right? So the right time is basically that which is decided by you. However, there are some things that I would like to touch upon, which is when you should not ignore your signs and symptoms anymore, which is when you're feeling so fatigued that your fatigue and your procrastination is actually taking a toll on your day-to-day life. Because as we'll also hear from others today, is that fatigue and procrastination is a sign of a depressive symptom that you might be going through, right? Then the second thing is that when we're talking about the issues that the youth is facing today, it is not just about an added pressure to succeed at any cost. It's really about the systems around us. We always are framing mental health as a personal issue, as a subjective issue, that okay, there are relationship issues, there is work life problems, there are things at the workplace. But it is very important to understand youth mental health as of today, to really recognize the contribution of systemic issues. The climate problems, the issue
Yes.
of unemployment, the issue of shifting generations, the idea, this is, if you're talking about Gen Z, this is a digital native generation. This is not the generation that has chosen this at a certain stage of life. Like, somebody who's in my 30s, like today I'm in my 30s, I chose to come on social media after my school or whatever, because that's when social media came into the picture. That is not a choice that a lot of the young people have right now. They're digital natives that way. So I think framing mental health conversations from the perspective of the systems that are surrounding us, with gender fluidity, unemployment issues, climate related anxieties, and various other things. All of that uh, comes together, to frame some existential questions that the young people are trying to ask today. So yes, there is definitely things are not easy; they are not straightforward, and the right time is a time that you choose. If you, however, see people who are feeling suicidal, or they are feeling very extreme, then that is also the right time for you as a friend or as a known person to intervene, not just for yourself but also somebody else who might be in need.
Yeah. Shweta, when Swarnima talks about there are external factors that also come in place, how do you look at that? How do you recognize these needs?
Yes, firstly, really excited to be on this platform for this summit. And I think everything that Swarnima was sharing, I completely resonate with. I think it's a very important point that she's brought up, that when we talk about mental health and youth mental health specifically, it's so important to go beyond the individual and beyond making it a personal issue, and to bring in a more holistic understanding of what's really happening in the lives of young people today, because of which they might be experiencing depression, anxiety, overwhelm, or a bunch of other concerns. I think I have so often seen this on social media, where there are these posts and reels about 5 signs that you have anxiety, or 5 signs that you might be depressed. And while that, of course, gives a certain amount of access to information for people, which is great, I think it kind of makes the issue of mental health so narrow, as if there's something that I have to identify about myself that is wrong,
Hmm.
and without really taking context into account. Like, maybe in the given situation I am in, maybe the family life I'm in, or the world that I'm in, like Swarnima also mentioned, with the climate crisis, with unemployment, anxiety is a very natural response to that. It's not, in fact, a dysfunction. It's a very normal response to that. So I think if the conversations around mental health by therapists, other people, especially teachers, parents, etc., around the young people, if those conversations can also focus on not just the individual distress, but also the larger issues at hand that might be contributing to it, I think that's when I truly feel that resilience can also build for the young person, to know that they are not alone in feeling this way, that this is a collective experience that's happening, and that it needs to be addressed.
So, I really liked how both of you mentioned this. It's not a personal issue, it is a collective ecosystem. So, as someone who gets overwhelmed very easily, I sometimes find it very hard to even talk to my parents about it. If I'm having a hard day at work, if there's something going on personally, I just feel ki why should I put this emotional labor on my parents or on my partner? So is there a way to self prioritize the self compassion and not put the stigma myself? Like sometimes I put it अपने आप पे मैं डाल रही हूँ कि नहीं यार मैं कैसे कर सकती हूँ मैं कैसे बोल सकती हूँ अपनी पेरेंट्स को सो how can one go through this, how can one prioritize self compassion during a mental health crisis? Anyone of you can go on it.
So, Anima, do you want to take it? Or? Okay, so I think two thoughts are coming to my mind. One is, as a young person who's maybe never spoken about their mental health to anyone, it's a very sensitive thing that they're trying to share with someone, which means that their vulnerability is probably at an all-time high. So I do understand the hesitation, before a young person might think about sharing it with a parent or a teacher, someone that you're not quite sure will really understand what you're going through. Will it be a safe space? Will they not judge you if you tell them about your concerns? So I think these are very valid thoughts that might come up for a young person. So I would firstly say that your vulnerability needs to exist in a safe space. So as a young person, you also need to understand who can be that one person that you think will not judge you, will be able to hold space for this. Maybe it could be a friend, if not a parent. But your first experience of vulnerability, it's so important for it to be a safe one. And I think the second thing of self compassion, like, definitely, I think the stigma around mental health is definitely, I would say, shifting today with, like I said, a lot of information and awareness that is out there. In fact, young people today, based on, the clients that I also see in my work, there are a lot more young people who are open and willing to access therapy than ever before. So there is a shift in the stigma attached to it. But I think that's where the compassion also needs to come in, for a person to know that it's okay for them to kind of talk about what they're going through, that there is no shame in being able to share what you're going through. But yes, to also identify what is a safe space for you to be able to share, that is super important. Like, say, a quick example I could share is, someone who might be experiencing certain diverse identities, like, say, a queer person or a transgender person. They may not always feel safe within the family to actually talk about those things. So it's okay for them to not assume safety just in the family, and to first access someone that they truly feel is safe. And one final point I will add is that, I often notice the onus on the person, like the young person or whoever is going through their mental health concerns. The onus is on us to be able to talk, ki baat
Hmm.
karo, reach out,
Yeah.
connect with someone. But how does one do that if, like I said, the safety also has not been created by those around us? So I think more conversations also need to happen on how can parents, teachers, and young people ourselves, how can we also start to build more compassion and safety for each other so that we
Hmm.
can hold better spaces for such conversations.
Yeah. So, Swarnima, you are actively involved in furthering the femtech revolution in India. And when Shweta spoke about the safety nets, so how are we building the infra around? Is India equipped today to build this safety nets for young people navigating mental health?
I'll start with where the she ended this. I really agree very much with what she said, that um, the onus of starting a conversation, right?
Hmm.
See, when someone is going through, firstly, let me just also make a distinction about when we are having this conversation around mental health. Okay, you will see this tagged in different ways: emotional health, emotional well-being, mental health, mental illness, etc., etc. I think at the very outset, it is extremely important to get this labeling correct. Okay, we all have emotional needs. I think this is something that we at Gayatri we are talking about it all the time. Every individual out there has emotional needs. Every person, every human being has emotional needs. Okay, a lot of our struggles at a very micro level, at a very individualistic level, a lot of the mental health struggles or emotional health struggles begin when those emotional needs are not recognized, verbalized, or made space for. Okay, therefore, many times the onus of the conversation comes on the person who is feeling emotionally uncomfortable, say with respect to relationship with parents, or respect to a relationship with spouses, etc. Right? And we, it's like, yeah, khul ke bolo. We say that at Gayatri we say khul ke pucho, right? But when it comes to mental health, many a time that verbalizing is the key challenge. It's a critical challenge, like you said, Ragini, that sometimes I feel इतनी सी तो बात है, मैं इनको क्यों बॉदर करूं, मैं इनको क्यों ट्रबल करूं, राइट?
Yeah.
This is the self talk that we have, that is my emotional need valid enough for me to verbalize, right? That is a critical sort of problem that a lot of people face, including myself, and this doesn't change, right? Now, so navigating that is first thing. So no, the most important way to navigate this is to acknowledge and is to remember that everyone has emotional needs, and then you start fostering a conversation around that at home, at the workplace, etc., etc. In every space the dynamics are entirely different. At home, things obviously tend to get much more emotional. At the workplace you cannot make it too emotional, because at the end of the day it's about, it's a certain persona of yourself that you're carrying at work. I mean, we can keep debating whether that's good, bad, whatever, but that is how things are right now. That what is the self that you're bringing to work, and is that self comfortable, etc. Now the last point is that, is India ready in terms of infrastructure? The short answer is no, but we are getting there. That I don't think society in general is very ready with the infrastructure to support mental health as such. There are a lot of policies that are being now spoken about in India. There's a lot of policy being spoken about by the NHS and various other systems in the US, where say when we're talking about maternal health, then the maternal mental health aspect has to be included in it. Or when we're talking about people in the workplaces, then mental wellness is being added as something, as a very key component of workplace culture, as a measurable component of workplace culture. So obviously things are moving in the very right direction. And as we heard earlier in the panel, that more young people than ever before are seeking therapy, which is huge, which is a huge this thing. However, I do think that if a country has to sort of like really talk about it, a society has to talk about mental wellness, there is an important role that community mental health plays. And that is something we have not done a lot in India so far. And I would love to hear it from the other panelists, because she's the expert. So I would love to hear her thoughts on that as well. But community mental health in many countries in the global south, it really helps. There's a lot of evidence that shows that, say, when there is community based mental health outreach, say for say we see this in the juvenile delinquency centers, that you have a community healing of children who have committed some crime, and they are now being reformed in juvenile centers, or children of mothers who are incarcerated, etc., etc. So there are these specific experiences around which community mental health interventions are designed, and a lot of outcomes are achieved. So definitely that can be much more robust. That is something we can ratchet up quite a bit in a country like India. But it does help. There is a lot of evidence that shows that it does help.
Okay. Shweta, would you like to add?
Yes, in fact, when Swarnima was talking about community mental health, I was vigorously nodding my head because, again, such an important part of the puzzle that often gets overlooked. And, in fact, I was looking at the theme for this year's World Mental Health Day, which is the idea that mental health should be a universal right and not a privilege. And I feel like that's such an important conversation to have. And I don't think that conversation can be had without including community mental health. Because true equitable access to mental health care can only happen when we're able to customize mental health care options for each individual's unique context. Like therapy cannot be the one and only, be all end all approach that every person in the world can access or can even relate to. Like a lot of young people today, sure, they're on social media, especially the urban youth is, but there is a large part of the youth in India that may not have access to social media, may not even have access to the language around what is therapy, what is mental health, who is a therapist. And for a lot of young people, then community becomes the most accessible way to experience a safe space and to take care of their mental health. And even on the mindland.com, right? I think one of the things we really believe in is the idea that mental health care cannot be approached through a cookie cutter lens where everybody is expected to benefit from the same kind of support. So, which is why we go beyond therapy and also amplify the work of support groups and group therapy, and also communities that are doing work around, supporting mental health for people, including helplines, including workshop spaces. So, spaces where the person can go beyond a one to one interaction and really be able to have that kind of mutual connection and support with people.
Yeah.
So, 100% agree.
Yeah, so to bank on that, I want to know, how important it becomes to experiment while seeking help. How, like, maybe I don't want to have the old dated couch and book therapy. Maybe I want to go beyond that. So, how important is it to consider that every therapist methodologies are different, are varying? So, what do you suggest on that?
Absolutely. I think, to be able to also experiment with mental health support, one needs to also um, be able to recognize that they can access support at a much earlier stage before it reaches a quote unquote crisis or an extreme stage. Because when it's in a crisis sort of a situation, then you're looking for immediate relief. Then your body and your nervous system don't have the space to be able to experiment or, find more contacts of therapists or find other ways to care for mental health. So I think first and foremost, I would encourage people to really normalize the idea of asking for help or seeking support, any kind of support, at any stage, whichever you feel is the right time before it needs to go into a crisis mode. So I think that will enable people to kind of really look at what are the options out there. Like I mentioned, even on the mindclan.com, that's always what we encourage. We want to create like an ecosystem of safe spaces and mental health resources, so that any person who's coming onto this website, or basically anywhere that you're seeking help, if you don't find the right fit right away, like suppose if you don't think that therapy is feeling affordable or accessible, I wouldn't want that person to turn away feeling that, oh, there's no help available for me. So on the Mindplan, we are ensuring that they kind of access at least one other safe space. Maybe it's a workshop that's happening on
Yeah.
maybe anxiety skills, right? That feels more accessible. It's more affordable. It's also less, spotlight on me. But at least you get to experience what support can feel like. You get some information. So I think there's a lot of value in being able to experiment, but also at a time when you know that you have the capacity to be able to
Hmm.
experiment.
Right. So we are almost at the end of our conversation, and there are several takeaways from here today. We learned about community wellness and different strategies that we can apply while seeking help. Uh, as someone who's very actively involved on social media, there can be several triggers in sense that there are so many terminologies being used every day. There's digital detox, there's gatekeeping, there's trauma bondings, and sometimes it might get difficult to grasp everything. So are there any ways to save ourselves from this spiral, from this black hole of internet, and how do you guys strategize that, Swarnima?
Sure. So, you know, two, three things are extremely important. Okay. I think this term called infodemic, that really sort of gained a lot of currency during the pandemic, that on one hand, we're dealing with the pandemic, but on the other hand, we're dealing with this overflow of emotion, which is actually causing a lot of anxiety spirals. Now, I just want to contextualize this answer that, how do we deal with this in two, three ways? Number one is that, of course, there is a regular advice on, consuming as much social media as you require, sort of trying to curtail your time limit, have those time limit trackers on your phone, unfollow things that are uncomfortable for you, etc., etc. All that is there. Okay. But there are a couple of things. One thing is that we really need to be very mindful of the type of mental health information we are consuming, right? What Shweta said very, very correctly is that there are different types of modalities of therapy, or different types of therapeutic modalities, rather, that work for different things. Now, I will take the example of something that is very common, but we really don't talk about. And, maybe Shweta can also talk a little bit more about this is, see, something like an ADHD or people being on the autistic spectrum, etc. You know, there are many a time, a lot of things like social anxieties, having fatigue, feeling a sense of overwhelm, etc. A lot of these are signs and symptoms of someone being on the spectrum, but we don't talk about this enough. We try to make mental health advice into cheesy reels and cheesy memes, and that is very uncomfortable for me as a healthcare practitioner, right? I mean, I'm not a therapist. I'm squarely public health, but at the same time, it's even more concerning for me that this is the kind of public health messaging that is like going out over there. Now, what happens is that there is a gendered lens over here as well. You know, a lot of women remain underdiagnosed when it comes to things like ADHD, because a lot of things that people associate with ADHD, they are considered like feminine traits in a very problematic way. Oh, she's just ditzy, or these kind of problematic things, right? So what I'm trying to say is that I will again keep referring back to the labeling that I spoke about, which is emotional health, having emotional needs, having mental health needs, and having some kind of a diagnosed condition. It is very, if you are talking to somebody who has been diagnosed with depression or, bipolar disorder or ADHD, and tell them, oh, think positive, with a flower in the background, that's pissing off. So we have to also really curate our social spaces in a very, very mindful way. And it begins with knowing that, okay, where do I lie? Where exactly is my mental health need like situated? Do I think that I've been feeling like I'm in a depressive state for like way too long? I should probably, speak to someone. For example, I've been, like we say about physical pain, right? I mean, for example, if I'm getting a migraine during my PMS, for 6 months in a row, then so at one point somebody's going to say, right, okay, this is like not okay. I must see a gynac or something like that. Or my period pain I've been having a Meftal or something every period for the last 8 months. That is not okay. So similarly with your mental health symptoms as well, if there are some symptoms that you're seeing have been sticking with you for a really long time, you must seek help. Start with a GP. I don't know, whatever. Many a time it's just about deficiencies or whatever. Start with a doctor that you know, if you don't know a therapist right away. All right. Then the second is that when you have been, if you're diagnosed or something, how are you curating your online space? Right. And not every space is conducive to talking about a certain thing. For example, at Gayatri, we talk a lot about mental health and things like that. We talk about postpartum illness, this and that, but we have only now begun to talk about ADHD, etc. Similarly, like, just because something is a healthcare platform doesn't mean that everything and anything under the sun is going to be serviced, or that is the right space. So curating that space and really knowing that is extremely important. And the last thing I would say is that, you know while I'm a huge advocate of speaking out, I also like to say that, speak out in the right spaces. You know, for example, a lot of things you mentioned, you spoke about family and parents and things like that. A lot of these intergenerational conversations are very difficult. You know, you can't just start with some topics with your family and things and say that it will necessarily be a safe space for that. A safe space is a safe space for some things and not for other things. And this is an extremely important distinction to be mindful of when it comes to mental health. Yes, your family, your home, your parents, they are a safe space. They are a non-negotiable space for you, but maybe not for everything right now. So how do you gradually have that conversation? Maybe you can reach out to your parents when you have had a better handle on what you're going through, etc., etc. So I think these are some ways in which we can sort of revisit and introspect our own response to mental health conversations. And detox, that is also another way of detox. It's not just about switching off your apps and phones, but this is also, curation is also a form of digital detox.
Yeah, lovely. Introspection is something that I would highly bank on. Shweta, any parting thoughts for us?
I think the only thing that's coming to my mind is about how, I think with the social media bit, right, especially about triggers around mental health information, I feel like mental health information for the longest time has been gate kept by, people in power, whether that's psychiatrists, psychologists, anyone who has had a degree or knowledge around this kind of information. So I think social media is a wonderful vehicle to, in a sense, decentralize that power, because now more and more people have access to these terms and these experiences. Like Swarnima also said, people talking about ADHD, autism, these are not generally spoken about. So I love that and I'm here for it. And at the same time, I think that mindfulness aspect is so important, where I think if you can use the information that you get on social media as a bit of a gateway into curiosity. Like if it gets you to kind of think about, okay, wait, why is this feeling relatable to me? Have I been experiencing something like this? And then if it becomes a gateway for you to actually seek help, then I would rather have a person come to me for therapy with misinformation so that we can navigate it together, than have someone never come to therapy because they don't know what's going on with them. So I think I would probably leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation today. I'm pretty sure we'll be taking away a lot of things. And have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ragini.
Thank
There
you
is
so
one thing I
much.
might add in the end, and I would love to, just also have Shweta's this thing. I completely agree. I think democratization of information, I'm sure, Shweta must be getting this a lot, at Mindclan that, आजकल ज़्यादा हो गया ये सब. जितना हम बोलेंगे डिप्रेशन डिप्रेशन उतना ना हमें लगता है कि हमें हो, those kinds of things people keep talking about, right? Whenever something new is happening, then this is our attitude towards it, that just because, but but therefore it is very important to use words very carefully. For example, we keep saying things like, oh, this triggers me, or that triggered me. I don't know what is the right way. I don't have the right answer for this, and maybe Shweta can, maybe weigh in on this. But a lot of words are used very lightly, and what that happens is that you misidentify things. Something annoying you and something setting you off does not mean that that is a trigger. Trigger is a very specific thing. So sometimes it's not a bad idea to, and I just do this in general, because when I see a word a lot, and I don't know much about it, and I'm suddenly seeing that a lot of people are using this, on social media and all of that, it's not a bad idea to go to any one source that is an expert source in mental health or in that topic, and just read up a little bit and reorient your mind, because before we know it, the incorrect things or inaccurate things become a part of our vocabulary, and it just skews our perspective in the way we are seeking help, right? So this is just a, it's not I mean, we cannot escape social media or things like that, like scrolling and all that, doom scrolling, another word for you. We are all doing it, we're all guilty of it. But once in a while, it is not a bad idea to just read a little bit and just shift our thought accordingly, so maybe that is something that a lot of young people and older people can also do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think just to quickly address what Swarnima was saying, that I think the fact that people are using these terms so lightly speaks about speaks to the fact that they don't have the correct vocabulary for identifying their feelings. I mean, we are not taught these things growing up, right? I wasn't taught how to identify the difference between feeling triggered and feeling annoyed and a bunch of those things. So I think it speaks to that, which means that I think, yeah, the responsibility also lies in being able to educate ourselves, reorient our understanding of these terms, and also to be able to have these conversations with compassion with each other. If someone
That's
around you is using a term like this, like, oh, I'm so OCD because I like to keep my shoes in a certain way, it's probably a quirk, right? OCD is a very distressing illness to live with. But if you can maybe have that conversation as a listener, if you can kind of point that out to the person and be like, hey, like, do you actually know what OCD is? Like, let's actually find out a little more about it, as opposed to shaming the person and being like, don't use this term. I think, yeah, that's also an important part of the process.
Yeah. Education and kindness goes a long way any day. Thank you so much. We can conclude this conversation, and yeah, thank you for being a part of the summit.
thank you so much, Shweta. It was lovely meeting you. Thanks a lot, Ragini, for putting this together. It was lovely being here.
Same here. Thank you so much for having me.